Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing a good friend of mine, Phil Wheaton, and we're in Managua, Nicaragua. So I've asked Phil to tell us about himself and his life. And even though many people know Phil Wheaton from his speaking and his writing and ministering as a priest, I would just start by asking Phil, who is Phil Wheaton? Phil.
Joe, I'm an Episcopal priest. First served for 12 years in the Dominican Republic as a missionary there, and worked mainly among British West Indians who had migrated there from the British Islands, and then became part of that complex of Haiti and the Dominican Republic on the same island of Hispaniola. So that was where my first mission began. Then years later, I was sent by the National Council of Churches, the Latin America Department of the National Council of Churches, to Washington, D.C. to begin to raise the consciousness about Americans, about the importance of the mass migrations that were beginning to develop from Latin America forth into the United States. And so that led me into Latin America and to awakening people to different explosions that were happening during the 60s, 70s, and 80s in Latin America, which took me on many journeys to Central America and including to Nicaragua. And I've been coming here working with poor campesinos, and my wife and I have been doing that for the last 20 years. So I'm this is my kind of third homeland after the United States and the Dominican Republic. I consider Nicaragua my third patria, homeland, and I'm very glad to be here and have a chance to talk with you once again.
Great. Now, Phil, perhaps if we can go back to your time in the Dominican Republic, what years were you there, and what impact did the U.S. invasion in 1965 have on your life?
Well, I go back a long ways. I'm 88 years old, so I started in 1952, and I was in the Dominican Republic until 1964. And during that period of time, of course, we had the beginnings of the U.S. Reacting and opposing a lot of the revolutionary changes that were going on, in which countries, entire countries like this country's, were dominated by dictators. Dictators that the United States had supported for many, many years, going all the way back to the 1930s. And so I learned very quickly in the Dominican Republic that we were facing serious problems with dictators like Trujillo. So that became my principal task in life, was to awaken the American people to this through books, through talks, through visits, through delegations that we brought them down, and I never made very much money, but I could bring a delegation of 15 and take them around Latin America, and my way would be paid for if all of those other 15 paid their bills. So even though I was, as most missionaries, born poor, so to speak, in terms of not having very much money, I have lived an extremely rich life in terms of meeting all kinds of people and experiencing many of these roles that the United States was playing in Latin America.
So your purpose in doing that was to share with people largely from the United States your own critical perspective on U.S. foreign policy, and but to help them to get a good look at it themselves from various points of view in Latin America.
Yes, and as you know very well, that the United States was behind many of those, backing those dictators. This is something that is not talked about very much in the United States, but everyone in Latin America knows this. So he was in power only 8 months when they overthrew him. We were taken before Trujillo. I was taken before Trujillo, and another priest, William Whittler, who became an important part of the National Council, his name was on a list to be assassinated.
November 19th of that year, 61, my name appeared on a death list for our community. And it was by the grace of God and the action of some young officers in the Air Force who stopped the killing, who wouldn't permit it, and who threw the family of Trujillo out of the country, that actually my life was saved at that moment, along with about, I understand it was almost 1,000 people across all of the Dominican Republic who would have been assassinated that night.
Do you know how your name got on that death list?
Well, it was partially because after Trujillo died, I became less cautious about things I said. And the government kept lists.
So I'm saying that this happened to just ordinary people like us who were down to basically help out people and to serve them in whatever way we could. And so our political consciousness was blasted wide open in terms of these experiences.
And so why was Juan Bosch considered unacceptable to the powers that be in the Dominican Republic and to the U.S. and was overthrown in 1963?
Yes. Well, it was because he was going to bring in a real democracy and not a sellout of the elite in the country at that time. Were basically sold out to the elitist powers and to the wealthy, and of course to the regime that they grew up in. And now Juan Bosch was going to change that and to install a really creative democracy. And some people charged him with being a communist because he wanted to do that. But I knew him personally. We both were printing books at the same time in the same publishing house, and I got to know Juan Bosch personally. So this is not anything that I'm making up. This was my life, and Juan Bosch was a friend of mine. So this is a first-hand story of how close one becomes in those circumstances to very important events.
Mm-hmm. So he wanted to change the situation in the Dominican Republic in favor of the majority, who were and still are poor and depressed and exploited. That was his intention, was to make some serious changes in the social and economic system of the Dominican Republic.
If we go back to Guatemala, for instance, it was the Dulles brothers and their huge business that they had there, that the democracy that lasted there for 10 years 6 years under Arevalo and 4 years under Arbenz, and both of them outstanding pro-democracy people, and they were overthrown because they were promoting a democracy that was going to turn more power over to the people, and they didn't want anything of it, and so they overthrew. The United States was key in overthrowing democracy in that country as well as in the Dominican Republic. So this is a phenomenon of the United States in many places in Latin America.
Mm-hmm. When the Arbenz government was going to nationalize at least part of the unused, uncultivated land of the United Fruit Company, I think that was the thing that provoked the U.S. reaction and the CIA-sponsored coup.
Right. And they actually told them, you can stay here, but you have to take all this land that you've appropriated and make it work. You've got to seed it, and you've got to have people working on it, producing jobs for poor campesinos or whatever, but you can't just let the land lie fallow. And because they refused to do that, they weren't going to change their modus vivendi. And so out of that situation, of course, the military took over, and they're still in power to this day, regardless of the facade of pseudo-democracy that exists in Guatemala. Mm-hmm.
So now, going back to the Dominican Republic again one more time, when Juan Bosch was overthrown, basically by his own military, with the support of the U.S., but basically by his own military, and then in 1965, there was an attempt by a certain faction of the military of the Dominican Republic to bring him back as the rightful constitutional president. That's when the U.S. invaded. Is that right? So the U.S. actually invaded under President Johnson, sent in about 30,000 troops. What was that all about? Why did the U.S. want to prevent his return since he had been elected president?
Right. Well, the goal there was basically to stop this kind of progressive stuff that was going on, and they invaded. And as you said, Johnson was president at that time. And remember, Johnson was also fighting a war in Vietnam. Right. So we can't forget that operation, which also turned into a disastrous warfare that never accomplished anything there. And so in terms of the Dominican Republic, why they were very much afraid, and I'm talking about the what Juan Bosch used to call the tutumpote. The tutumpote want their power, and they want it for themselves alone. So they were the elitist cadre of the ruling class, and this was going to be a significant change in having a participatory democracy, and that was the end of that. The United States ended that with an invasion, so we went down during that time. I was there during the time of the occupation. So we see this stuff going on worldwide, and it's a matter of the fact that the United States is an empire in addition to being a democracy, and that clash is one of the current contradictions in the United States to this day.
So these are not just isolated incidents or accidents of U.S. policy. This is really part and parcel. The nature of U.S. policy for many, many years, decades, has been to support the oligarchies in power, support the capitalist system, support a system that is wide open to U.S. investment, and all of this in the name of democracy.
Yes.
Right? But it has nothing to do with the true meaning of democracy.
And David Rockefeller went to Johnson when he was fighting his war in Vietnam and said, get out of this war as quickly as possible because it's killing the U.S. economy. That is, we're putting so much money into this war that it's hurting business. And David Rockefeller is interested only in one thing, and that is profit. And so, yes, so it has implications not only globally, but within the United States as well.